She thought she was being used in a game. He believed she was just another challenge, but no bet in the world could predict what blooms when two wounded souls collide, between broken promises, painful silences, and a love that grew from the unexpected. They discovered something that neither time nor pride could erase. Get ready for an intense, real story, full of emotional twists, where love doesn't start with a kiss, but with a plea for forgiveness. If this story touched your heart, subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications and comment below. Where are you listening to this story from? Your like helps the channel grow and continue bringing more emotional stories like this. Share it with someone special. High atop Manhattan's most imposing skyscraper, the wind whispered against the glass windows of Blake Tower's penthouse, where the city lights stretched out like a golden sea, constantly shifting. It was here, at this absurd height above, the real world, that Liam Blake stood, gazing at the horizon with an expression that mixed power and melancholy. He wore a perfectly tailored dark suit, his cuffs fastened with white gold cufflinks, and in his hands he held a glass of whiskey he hadn't touched. Before him, the city pulsed with the energy that was so typical of New York. Impatient horns, sirens cutting through the night, laughter and hurried footsteps echoing below. But for Liam, all of that felt distant, almost unreal, because inside him something was out of place. Something no skyscraper, fortune or business success could fix. The memory had a name, Mia Kingsley. No matter how much time passed, some scars never faded. They only hid beneath layers of routine and control. And Mia, well, she hadn't been just a love. She had been a promise of a future, until the night he saw her leaving a restaurant with Jacob Vance, his greatest business rival, with red lipstick still smeared. That night, Liam didn't just lose a girlfriend. He lost faith. He buried the man who believed in sincere feelings, and in his place he built a cold, calculating version of himself, armored against any form of vulnerability. From that point on, his life became a sequence of meetings, contracts, investments and million-dollar acquisitions. No mistakes, no room for disappointments. Love? Just another beautiful word in wedding speeches that he listened to out of obligation. What few knew, maybe no one, was that behind that impeccable demeanor, there was a man still wondering if he would ever be able to love again without the fear of being betrayed. A soft tap on the glass door interrupted his thoughts. "Mr. Blake," said Julian, his personal assistant, opening the door just enough to avoid invading too much. "Mr. Reed is waiting in the car. The event starts." In 20 minutes, Liam didn't respond right away. He kept staring at the city, as if trying to find some reason not to go downstairs. "Why am I even going to this event?" he asked, without taking his eyes off the view. "You donated $500,000 to the Astoria Foundation. They're honoring. Are you tonight, right? Charity, an important image move for the shareholders and a good distraction." Liam slowly turned his body, leaving the glass on the side table. He adjusted his tie with precision, as if every detail of his suit was armor against the outside world. "Let's go," he said, walking toward the elevator, with the posture of someone who never allowed himself to show weakness. The mirrored interior of the elevator reflected his image. Perfectly styled hair, controlled expression, grey eyes with no trace of emotion. And yet, something about his reflection bothered him, as if something was missing, as if deep down he was tired of playing a role. Julian pressed the ground floor button and kept the respectful silence Liam so valued. As they descended, the businessman tried to push away the memory of his last conversation with Mia, a text message on his phone a few months ago. "I miss you. I still think about you." He hadn't replied, not because he didn't feel anything, but because he knew that any reply would mean reopening wounds that had barely healed. The black car was waiting at the side entrance of the tower. Logan Reed, their college friend and now a minority partner at Blake Properties, was sitting in the back seat, a smug smile on his face and a glass of champagne in his hand. "Finally. I thought you were going to leave me alone in this jungle of shallow people," he joked, opening the door for Liam. "This from the guy who loves gala events?" Liam replied, getting into the car with a slight smile. I love observing the chaos, said Logan. And of course challenging friends who take themselves too seriously. Liam raised an eyebrow. Challenges? You'll understand. When we get there. The mysterious tone of his friend didn't quite spark his curiosity at that moment. He was more interested in finishing the night as quickly as possible, going back home and drinking the whiskey he had left untouched. But, as always, Logan was full of surprises, and Liam knew, even though he didn't admit it, that his old friend had a knack for stirring up his life at the most improbable moments. Their arrival at the Astoria Grand Hotel was marked by flashes, fake smiles, and dozens of hands shaking. Liam walked down the red carpet with the ease of someone who had been doing it for years, and he had. Public appearances were part of the game, and he played it better than anyone. The main hall was a work of art in the form of an event. Crystal. Chandeliers hung from the vaulted ceiling, while violins played a classical melody in the background. Waiters silently glided between tables, serving wine and canapes with unpronounceable names. There she is, Logan said, leaning slightly toward Liam. Olivia Hayes, the rebel of the season. Liam followed his friend's gaze and saw a woman in a tight black dress, her hair loose, striking makeup, and a posture that defied every social protocol of the place. She laughed loudly, gestured freely, and seemed completely uninterested in the attention she was attracting, both admiring and judgmental. Never heard of her, Liam said, although her image had already captured his attention. Of course you have. You just don't care about gossip. She's the late Senator Hayes' daughter and goddaughter of the Whitmore family. But since her father passed, the stepmother took over everything. And now she wants to marry Olivia off to a washed-up politician to keep up appearances. And she doesn't want that. She'd rather set the place on fire than accept it. She's been expelled from 3 schools, leaked photos of a drunken senator at a party, and has a reputation that would make her grandmother faint. Sounds like your type, Liam joked. Actually, I thought it was yours. Liam chuckled lightly, skeptical. I don't play with dynamite. Logan moved closer and whispered, What if I challenged you to transform her? In 3 months, a perfect lady, a sham marriage. I'll bet 2 million. Liam looked at his friend with a mix of amusement and disbelief. You're kidding. I'm serious. Marry her for convenience. Make her the perfect woman for the business world. Show that even the wildest of women can become a Blake. Liam paused for a few seconds, watching Olivia laugh hysterically as she spilled champagne on her dress. She wiped the glass with the napkin from the table next to her, without asking permission, and laughed, as if nothing else mattered. What if she agrees? He asked. Logan smiled. Then you've got a game and I've got a bet. Liam looked at Olivia one more time. She, at that moment, was staring directly at him, as if she knew she was being watched, and she smiled. A challenging, almost provocative smile. That was where it all began, but he still didn't know how much that woman would change his life. The night at the Astoria Grand Hotel had just begun, but for Liam and Olivia, the first invisible threads of a shared destiny were already being woven. The luxurious ballroom, illuminated by crystal chandeliers and scented candles, seemed like a stage set for a play, and they would be the unlikely leads in a story that no one would dare predict. Liam still watched Olivia from a distance, as if trying to decipher her. It was impossible to ignore her presence, not just because of her obvious beauty, but because of the contrast she created in a place filled with protocols and vanity. While other women displayed practiced smiles and calculated poses, Olivia walked with authenticity. Even her rebellion had an elegance to it. She danced alone in the center of the floor, barefoot, with her heels in her hands, and laughter spilling from her lips like champagne. In the background, the string quartet played Vivaldi, but Olivia moved as if she were listening to alternative rock, and that fascinated Liam more than he cared to admit. "Are you going to back out of the challenge, Blake?" Logan teased, taking another sip of his drink. Liam shook his head, still undecided. The plan sounded absurd, almost ridiculous. Marrying for a bet, turning a woman into a perfect lady. It went against everything he stood for, but part of him, the both wounded and skeptical part, saw it as just another business deal, a contract like any other. She'll never accept, Liam retorted. Are you backing out before even trying? That's not like you. Logan smiled, throwing in the final bait. Besides, I didn't hear anyone say this was about love. It's a business deal, a temporary partnership. 3 months, at most. That was enough time for a decision to form. The next morning, Olivia woke up with a headache and a heavy conscience. The photos from the party were already up on gossip sites, along with nasty comments and speculations about her behavior. Nothing she wasn't used to. But that morning, something felt different. A sense that something bigger was coming. And it was. When she went downstairs for breakfast, she was surprised to find Julian, Liam Blake's assistant, sitting in her living room as if he were part of the furniture. Miss Hayes, Mr. Blake would like to invite you to a private lunch. He has a proposal that might interest you. Olivia raised an eyebrow, confused and suspicious. Blake? Liam Blake? The one and only. And what does the king of skyscrapers want with me? Julian smiled enigmatically. Perhaps to build something together. She could have refused. She could have sent him and his impeccable suit packing, but there was an unease in her chest. A feeling that mixed curiosity and desperation, because her life, however full of glitter, was in ruins. Since her father's passing, her stepmother, Clarissa Hayes, had taken control of everything. The fortune, the public image, her freedom. Clarissa was cold, manipulative, and now she was pressuring Olivia to accept a marriage with a washed-up congressman 20 years her senior in exchange for political favors and stability for the family business. It was humiliating and suffocating, so that very afternoon Olivia showed up at the Blake Tower restaurant wearing a scarlet-red dress, high heels, and an ironic expression. So, you want to turn me into a princess, Liam Blake, she said, crossing her legs, with elegance and defiance. Not a princess, a woman who takes her own name with dignity. He answered without hesitation. I want to propose a marriage of convenience. 3 months, a contract, no touch, no feelings, just public presence. In exchange, you get to be free from your stepmother's blackmail. And I win a stupid bet that I shouldn't have accepted. But I did. Olivia stared at him for long seconds. The tension between them was palpable. There was no cheap seduction, no pretense, just 2 broken adults trying to control their own wreckage. And what happens after 3 months? She asked. We separate. Each of us goes back to our life. No scandals, no obligations. You get your freedom, I get my money. Olivia laughed. A light, almost sad laugh. You're worse than they say. Then she extended her hand. Deal, but I demand one clause. No invading my bedroom, no attempts at seduction, and no false promises of eternal love. I've never made any. Liam shook her hand. We have a deal. The wedding was scheduled for 3 weeks later. Enough. Time to stage the spectacle. The press pounced like vultures. Headlines like, From Scandal to the Altar, Liam Blake and Olivia Hayes' surprise romance plastered websites and magazines across the country. Clarissa nearly had a nervous breakdown, but she couldn't do anything. Liam was untouchable. And Olivia, for the first time, felt like she had checkmated her stepmother's cruel game. The day of the ceremony arrived wrapped in a mix of glamour and disbelief. In the Waldorf Astoria event hall, the altar was set up between columns of white, flowers and hanging crystals. Celebrities, businessmen, and politicians filled the seats, whispering theories and imaginary scandals. Olivia walked down the aisle with her head held high. She wore a pure silk dress, no excessive shine, but with a cut so precise it silenced even the most acidic critics. Her eyes were calm yet distant. Liam stood waiting for her, as always, with his unshakable posture. But inside he felt something strange, as if he were taking part in a ritual that would seal more than just a contract. As if a part of him knew this moment wouldn't be so easy to forget. Do you, Olivia Hayes, take Liam Blake to be your lawful wedded husband, respecting the terms of the signed agreement? The officiant asked. I do, she said with a subtle smile. Do you, Liam Blake, take Olivia Hayes to be your lawful wedded wife, committing to the union as per the contract? I do. There was no kiss, only the sound of restrained applause and blinding flashes. The ring was placed as though signing a deed. Neither of their eyes searched for romance, just silent complicity. But that night, alone in the room prepared for their wedding night, something unexpected happened. Olivia sat on the edge of the bed, took off her earrings, let her hair down, and then said, "I just want to make one thing clear. Those tabloids, that image you have of me, it's all an illusion. I've never slept with anyone. I've never had anyone." Liam stopped in the middle of the room as if he had been punched. "What do you mean?" "I'm a virgin, Liam." She looked him in the eye, unashamed, without embellishments. "And I'm not saying this to provoke you. I just thought you deserved to know. After all, you married me thinking I was something I've never been." He didn't know what to say. For a few seconds, the silence screamed louder than any words could, because at that moment, all the images Liam had built of Olivia began to crumble. And something inside him, something very old, began to stir, as if her truth had touched a forgotten place within him. But he didn't know what to do with that. Not yet. Blake Manor was not just a house. It was a symbol of power, tradition, and control. Built on the banks of the Hudson River, its architecture harked back to ancient times. Marble columns, wide hallways, high ceilings, and a central staircase that seemed straight out of a European castle. Inside, every detail was carefully thought out. The paintings, the carpets, the furniture. Everything breathed perfection. Everything exuded order. But behind that impeccable facade, there was something that money couldn't buy: silence. When Olivia first crossed the ornate iron gates as Mrs. Blake, she immediately realized that this place was designed to keep emotions locked away. No laughter echoed through the rooms. No affectionate touches mixed with the muffled sounds of routine. The household staff, the housekeeper, the cook, the gardener, the driver, seemed programmed to act with absolute discretion. They all knew their place. They all avoided direct eye contact. She was treated with respect, of course, but with a coldness that made her feel like a luxury guest in a gilded prison. At their first breakfast as a couple, Liam and Olivia sat at opposite ends of the massive oak table. Between them, a row of porcelain plates, fresh juices, artisanal breads, and carefully cut fruits. "Did you sleep well?" he asked, without looking up from his newspaper. "Like a rock," she replied, crossing her legs and trying to hide her discomfort. The silence returned. The sound of the spoon gently tapping against the teacup was the only interruption. For minutes, Olivia watched Liam with curiosity. He seemed made of concrete, flawless, elegant, but unreachable. There was no warmth in his gestures, nor urgency in his words. The following hours were filled with lawyer visits, meetings with advisors, and constant phone calls. Liam seemed to have plunged back into the world that kept him secure, the world of numbers, contracts, and decisions. Olivia, on the other hand, walked silently through the mansion, trying to understand where exactly she had ended up. The contract said she could roam freely, but the feeling of being watched, even if discreetly, was constant. It was on the third afternoon that she discovered the secret garden at the back of the property, hidden by a side corridor and an arch covered in ivy. The place was almost magical. Stone benches, small fountains, and beds of lavender and jasmine. A space that seemed forgotten by time and by Liam's eyes. There, Olivia began to spend her afternoons. She brought a book, a notebook, or just sat, listening to the sound of the water and letting the wind mess with her hair. That garden, silent and invisible, became her refuge, the only space where she allowed herself to breathe. But what Liam didn't know, and perhaps didn't suspect, was that Olivia, even in silence, was changing. Away from the cameras, the flashes and the judgments, she began to rediscover pieces of herself. She started observing more, understanding more, even about him. For example, she discovered that the housekeeper, Mrs. Ellen, had a daughter hospitalized for cancer treatment and hid this because she was afraid of being fired. Olivia, in secret, asked Julian to arrange a fund transfer to help the employee's family, never revealing the source. She visited, disguised, an orphanage in Yonkers, where her old nanny had grown up, and made a generous donation, demanding anonymity. She also bought dozens of blankets and food baskets, and personally delivered them to forgotten neighborhoods in the city. It wasn't part of any agreement. No one forced her. But Olivia felt, perhaps for the first time in a long time, that doing good reconnected her to something deeper than pain. While tabloids still portrayed her as the rebellious girl who snatched the lonely billionaire, in practice she was a woman in the process of rebuilding. And no one saw it. No one except Liam. That Friday night, he surprised her. Olivia had prepared her tea in the kitchen, alone, and was walking toward the garden when his voice stopped. "You've been going out there a lot." She turned slowly, as if fearing an accusation. "It's the only place in the house that breathes." Liam watched her for a moment. He was without his suit jacket, his shirt sleeves rolled up, a glass of wine in his hand. Something about him seemed lighter. "I thought you'd get bored." "Here," he said, "and I thought you'd completely ignore me." He gave a half smile, a rare gesture of humanity. "I tried." Silence. Olivia looked at him, disarmed by his honesty. "I'm not who you thought I was, Liam. I know." He took a sip of wine. "That's why I stopped trying to fit you into a mold. That night they had dinner together. No newspaper, no phones, no contracts, just food, the distant sound of the river, and two people trying to understand what they were doing there. It was during that dinner that Olivia spoke for the first time about her mother, about the happy childhood before the sudden death, about the emptiness Clarissa left by turning pain into control, about how she learned to use rebellion as a shield, because being labeled as a problem was less painful than being invisible. Liam listened without interrupting, his eyes fixed on her, attentive. When she finished, he simply said, "Mia's betrayal taught me that loving is losing control, and I hate losing control." Olivia smiled tenderly. "So here we are, two survivors of wars no one saw." And he agreed. In silence. In the following days, the atmosphere between them changed. It didn't turn into romance, not yet, but it became respect, quiet tenderness. A presence less hostile, more companionable. Liam began to wait for her for dinner. Sometimes he asked about her books. Other times, he left notes on her breakfast tray with subtle questions like, "Did you like the new greenhouse in the garden?" And Olivia, little by little, began to see the man behind the image. She saw how he treated the staff with fairness, how he went out at night to visit works in progress, how he held his own pain with elegance, like someone who had learned to suffer. In silence. One night she found him in his office, going over reports. She approached, curious. "Are you interested in social projects?" she asked. He looked up. "Depends. I have some ideas. Partnerships with shelters, reducing costs with deactivated properties, impact projects with a focus on the community." Liam looked at her as if seeing something new in her, something beyond the image. "Show me," he said, pushing a chair to the side, and there, side by side, they began to design something more. Not just a business proposal, a bridge, a link, but neither of them dared to call it a feeling, not yet. The nights at Blake Manor were no longer as quiet as before. The cold air from the Hudson still made its way through the gaps in the old windows, but there was something different in the air, a faint warmth, almost imperceptible, that began to emerge in the small exchanges of glances, the discreet gestures and the conversations that hadn't existed before. Olivia and Liam had learned to share space without building walls. It was subtle progress, but significant. It wasn't romance, not yet. But it was a rare type of coexistence where, for the first time, neither of them was trying to outdo the other. One evening, as the lights of the house went out, Olivia quietly descended the stairs and found Liam in the library. He was sitting in a dark leather armchair holding a book, with reading glasses softly hanging over his nose. The scene was so unusual that she hesitated at the door. "I didn't know you read romances," she commented, smiling. "This one is about war," he said, raising his eyes. "But there are some pages of poetry disguised in the middle. I couldn't sleep." "Me neither." Olivia entered, sitting on the opposite armchair. "My mind doesn't stop. It's like the quieter the environment, the louder the noise. In my head." She pointed to her forehead. Liam carefully closed the book. "What's been tormenting you so much?" She looked at the fireplace where the flames were dancing lazily. She took a deep breath. "I grew up hearing I was a mistake. A problem. After my mother died, Clarissa would say my behavior embarrassed the family, that I needed to be controlled. But no one ever told me what to do with the pain. No one ever gave me space to cry. So I screamed. With my actions, with my clothes, with my choices. I wanted to be seen, even if it was as a scandal. Liam remained silent. Not out of indifference, but out of respect. "You're not a mistake, Olivia," he said after a pause. "You're just trying to find a place where you can truly exist." She swallowed hard. It was the first time someone had said that so simply and so truthfully. "And you?" she asked. "Why did you decide to live alone here? Why build this castle and lock yourself inside it?" He hesitated, looked away, but her presence was gentle, and he was tired of pretending it didn't hurt. "I loved her," he said finally. "Mia. She came into my life when I still thought it was possible to reconcile love and business. I thought we'd be unstoppable together, but she betrayed me with my biggest competitor, not for love but for ambition, because he had shares in my company that I hadn't given her. I was just a step in her climb. That's cruel. No. More than the world we live in. Since then I've closed the doors. I turned every feeling into a spreadsheet, every emotion into a contractual clause. And did it work?" He smiled bitterly. "Until you showed up." The words hung between them for a few seconds, like a secret accidentally revealed. "You've been challenging me without saying a word, Olivia, since the beginning. And the strangest thing is, I don't want to control it anymore." She stood up slowly and walked toward him. Her eyes were shining, but not with tears. It was something deeper, a recognition, a reflection. "I'm tired of pretending too," she said, stopping in front of him. "Tired of running away." Liam stood up. They were close now, so close, that they could feel each other's breath, but neither of them moved. There was no hurry, no intention to break the delicacy of the moment. "I don't want to hurt you," he murmured. "Then don't hurt me, just stay," she replied. The fireplace crackled in the background, casting soft shadows on their faces. For the first time, Liam reached out and touched Olivia's face, not with desire but with care, like someone touching something too precious to break. She closed her eyes, and in that gesture, more intimate than a kiss, they both said everything they didn't know how to put into words. In the following days, something changed. Meals became more than meals. They became spaces for conversation, exchanging ideas, shared laughter. Liam began to invite Olivia to join him on visits to the company properties. She, in turn, suggested ways to transform abandoned spaces into temporary shelters or community support centers. "You should present this to the board," he said as they reviewed one of the proposals she had written. "And you should trust people more," she replied. "I'm starting to, on one of these visits." Olivia saw Liam interacting with a child at a community center. He crouched down, handed a toy and listened attentively. There were no cameras, no audience, it was just him. Whole, human. And in that moment, she realized she had fallen in love. Not with the billionaire, but with the man who existed behind the shield. That night, lying in her bed, Olivia hugged the pillow tightly. She was scared, because she knew real feelings didn't come with an exit clause. She knew that the heart didn't understand deadlines. And on the other side of the house, Liam stared at the ceiling of his own room, feeling an anxiety he hadn't felt since his 20s, a strange urge to run to her, and at the same time, a fear of ruining everything. It was like walking on thin glass, knowing the fall would be inevitable if a wrong step was taken. But maybe, just maybe, it would be worth it. What was beginning to grow between Liam and Olivia was fragile. Like a porcelain vase balanced on the edge of an unstable table, a single stronger breath could send it crashing to the floor, shattering it. And unfortunately, that breath was already on its way. The connection that was growing between them did not go unnoticed by those who were watching from afar, especially Mia Kingsley, the ex-girlfriend Liam thought he had left behind, and Clarissa Hayes, Olivia's calculating stepmother, who refused to accept that she had lost control over her stepdaughter. Two women united by the same goal, to destroy the union of Liam and Olivia. Mia watched from the shadows, hidden behind anonymous profiles, filtered news and informants in the corridors of power. She always knew how to move pieces in silence, how to create narratives, how to appear innocent while already causing chaos. Clarissa, on the other hand, did not hide her discontent. She called Olivia almost every day, leaving cold, terse, threatening messages, and when her stepdaughter started refusing invitations and ignoring veiled orders, she knew she had to act. "You're being fooled by a man who only sees you as a bet," Clarissa said over the phone. "You're forgetting who you are, who raised you. Don't be foolish." But Olivia was no longer the frightened young girl Clarissa had controlled with venomous words. And it was exactly this growing independence that fueled the stepmother's fury. It was Mia who took the first concrete step. On a cold morning, while Liam hurried off to a meeting, Olivia found an envelope on the entryway table. There was no return address, just her name written by hand. When she opened it, a series of photos jumped out at her. Clear images of Liam having dinner with Mia at an elegant restaurant in downtown Manhattan. The dates stamped at the bottom didn't lie. The photos had been taken the previous week. Her stomach turned. The blood seemed to freeze in her veins. Liam's face was serene in the images, as if he were comfortable with the person at the table. Mia, on the other hand, looked satisfied, her smile almost a warning. For a moment, Olivia felt the ground shift beneath her. She didn't want to ask, didn't want to confirm. Part of her wanted to believe there was an explanation. But the other part, the more wounded, the older part, the one that had learned to trust no one, might took control. She locked herself in the room, spent the entire day in silence. When Liam returned home and asked if everything was okay, she only responded with a polite smile and an "I'm tired." But inside, a wall began to rise again. Liam, on the other hand, had no idea the storm that was approaching. He was immersed up to his neck in a business crisis that had been brewing behind the scenes. Some of Blake Group's largest investors had started pulling their contributions, questioning recent decisions and alleging a lack of transparency, and it all started to fall apart after a certain meeting with Mia. She had requested lunch, claiming she wanted to bury the past. Liam agreed, not out of nostalgia but out of courtesy, and perhaps curiosity. During the lunch, Mia made ambiguous insinuations, suggesting that she still loved him, that she missed the time when they were powerful together. Liam, firm, refused any rapprochement. He told her that he no longer felt anything, that he was committed, and that the conversation didn't make sense anymore. But what he didn't know was that Mia was recording everything, and even less did he know that in the following days she would send edited excerpts of the meeting, of course, to strategic investors, implying that Liam was rekindling partnerships with untrustworthy figures. The results were immediate. Stock prices fell, internal panic set in, and rumors spread about instability in Blake Properties' leadership. And amidst all this chaos, Liam began to pull away, not by choice, but out of necessity. He spent sleepless nights with lawyers, analysts, consultants, emergency meetings, non-stop phone calls. Olivia barely saw him anymore, and when she did, it felt like he was on another planet. She, feeling betrayed by the photos and ignored by the distance, interpreted everything as confirmation of a single truth. She had been used. She felt foolish for having believed, for having opened up, for having let her guard down. "I should have known," she murmured to herself one night, sitting in the garden with tearful eyes. "I should have learned that pretty promises always hide dirty games." Meanwhile, Clarissa and Mia toasted, each in her corner, believing they had won. But something would happen that neither of them had predicted. One morning, at a small cafe, Olivia overheard two of Liam's employees talking at the table next to hers. They spoke in hushed tones, but she managed to catch some important pieces of the conversation. "If the fund doesn't come through by Friday, they'll lay off. 600 people. I heard he put everything he had into it. Even his personal properties. He's trying to hold it together with his own hands. And that story with the ex, it was all manipulated." Olivia felt the world spin. Right there, She realized that Liam wasn't ignoring her. He was trying to save not only his company, but the jobs of thousands of people. And once again she had judged without knowing the whole truth. Guilt rushed over her like a cold wave. She went back home with a tight heart and spent the night searching through documents, records and accounts. Then she remembered a financial fund her mother had left, a sum of money kept untouched for years in a confidential account. It was money Clarissa couldn't access, a resource Olivia had kept as a fleeing plan for an independent life. The Preeks. Next morning she went to a trusted lawyer's office, signed the papers, and transferred the amount to Liam's company. She only signed with the name O'Hays and demanded her identity remain anonymous. She did this without expecting thanks, without expecting anything in return. She did it because deep down she still loved him, and because she knew he deserved a chance, even if he would never know who helped him. But fate, as always, had its own plans. 2 days later, tragedy struck. On her way back from a voluntary delivery at a homeless shelter, Olivia was hit by a speeding truck. The driver fled. The collision was devastating. She was taken unconscious to the hospital in critical condition. Liam received the news while in a meeting. The world around him lost its sound. He dropped everything, ran. When he saw her intubated, bruised, motionless in that white bed, something inside him broke. When he returned home, still in shock, he found an envelope left by his accountant. It was a notification about a major financial movement that had saved the company, an unexpected investment, coming from an account signed by O'Hays. When he investigated the source of the fund, the full name appeared, Olivia Hayes. Liam dropped to his knees. She had saved him, even thinking she had been betrayed, even in silence, even in pain, and now she was between life and death. He didn't know if he would have time to say everything he needed to, but he knew he wouldn't. Leave until she opened her eyes. The hospital room was cold, clean, too quiet for someone like Olivia. She, who had always been synonymous with life, noise, and resilience, now breathed only with the help of machines. Her face, pale and serene, contrasted with the chaos her silent absence was causing inside Liam. He had been there since the first night, sitting beside her bed wearing the same blazer, unable to sleep. He didn't answer calls, didn't read emails, didn't leave for even a few minutes. The doctors told him that the coma was stable, but the timeline was uncertain, and that uncertainty was killing him. Every day he held her hand with a mix of desperation and reverence. He repeated the same phrases as if somehow he could bring her back with words. "I didn't know, Olivia," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I didn't know you had seen me with Mia, and even if you had, I should have explained. I should have protected you." The guilt ate at him like rust from the inside. And more painful than the sight of her motionless was the awareness that she had done everything for him, expecting nothing in return. On the third night, while rummaging through the documents of the financial transfer that had saved his company, Liam found a copy of the signature, O'Hays, and below it, a handwritten note to the bank. "Please make this discreet. Mr. Blake cannot know it was me. He never asked for anything, and I never needed a thank you. I just want him to continue being the man I learned to admire in silence." Liam read those words over and over, as if each line was a knife buried in his chest. "You really loved me," he murmured, his eyes misting. "And I was too blind to see." In the hospital corridors, Julian was running back and forth, trying to keep the press at bay. The story had already leaked. Olivia Hayes, wife of Liam Blake, in a coma after mysterious accident. The public reacted with shock, compassion, and many conspiracy theories. Clarissa showed up at the hospital on the 4th day. Dressed in mourning disguised as sobriety, she tried to approach the recovery room but was stopped by Liam. "You've done enough," he said coldly. "I'm the only family she has," she protested. "You're the reason she grew up believing she needed to hurt herself to be seen. Olivia is who she is despite you, not because of you." Clarissa tried to counter, but there were no arguments against the raw truth, and finally she left, humiliated. Liam returned to the room, and that night He rested his forehead on Olivia's hand. For the first time in many years he prayed, not out of religious devotion, but out of desperation. If there's anyone listening, if there's still justice in this world, bring her back. I'll give everything I have, just don't take her away. On the 6th day, something happened. It was subtle, a small movement in her fingers, a slight tremor in her eyelid. Liam's eyes widened and he called the nurse. The signs were fragile, but they were there. And finally, the next morning, Olivia opened her eyes. "Where am I?" she tried to say, but her voice was barely a whisper. "Shh." Liam held her hand firmly. "You're safe. You're with me." She blinked, confused. But seeing his face so close, so different from the one she remembered, something in her chest relaxed. "You're here," she said, almost not believing it. "I am, and I'm not going anywhere." Tears silently streamed down their faces. Liam gently touched her face. There were no rushed declarations, no exaggerated promises, just presence. And in that moment, presence was everything. Days later, with Olivia now conscious and out of danger, Liam told her everything. About Mia, about the betrayal of the investors, about the desperation that led him to pull away, about how he discovered her gesture and how that transformed him. "I thought I was losing you, Olivia, and only then did I realize I've loved you for a long time. I was just too afraid to admit it." She held his hand, and with a tired smile she replied, "I loved you too, Liam, even when I thought I hated you." They looked at each other for long seconds, and in that look there was reconciliation. But more than that, there was respect. A type of love that isn't built with flowers and pretty words, but with presence in the dark, with silent sacrifices, with the courage to stay when it would be easier to run away. Olivia's recovery was slow but steady. Liam accompanied every step, the physical therapies, the exams, the moments of pain. He stayed by her side as if each of her breaths was also his own. Meanwhile, behind the scenes, he began a quiet investigation into the accident. With Julian's help and a private investigator, he traced the truck driver, reviewed security footage and gathered evidence that the crash had been premeditated. And worse, Mia was behind it. Documents, messages, and testimonies were gathered. The police were notified. The arrest came swiftly, cold, without warning. Mia was arrested for attempted premeditated murder. And so the past was, for the first time, silenced with justice. But Liam didn't celebrate, because the real relief came only when Olivia, weeks later, already walking with the aid of a cane, entered with him into the garden greenhouse at the manor. She looked at the flowers he had secretly cultivated during her recovery. White roses, her favorite. "You remembered," she said, touched. "I never forgot," he replied. And then, with his heart lighter, he knelt right there, in the middle of the flowers, still without a ring in his hands but with his soul wide open. "You gave me everything, Olivia, and I don't want to waste another day without acknowledging that. But I'm still not ready to ask you to marry me again. Not until you've regained the right to choose, the right to be free." She smiled, kneeling with difficulty before him, and said, "And if even free, I want you." Liam smiled back. "Then I promise. I'll never love you with fear again." And she nodded, her eyes sparkling with life. Even with Olivia in the process of recovery, Blake Manor still carried an air of fragility, as if everything inside it knew that, although the storm had passed, the winds could still change. Liam and Olivia were closer than ever, but both knew. Loving after pain is like walking on glass. It's possible, but it requires care. However, behind the moments of shared silence, discreet smiles, and gentle touches of reconnection, there was one issue Liam had still not resolved. And he wouldn't rest until he did. The assassination attempt. That collision hadn't been a simple traffic accident. And Liam knew that the moment he saw the condition of the car. The impact had been too precise, too fast, too cruel. The driver had fled the scene, and days later the truck was found abandoned in an industrial warehouse. The name on the documents? Fake, the plates cloned. Everything smelled like premeditated crime. It was Julian who suggested hiring a private investigator. Discreet, experienced, loyal. In less than 2 weeks, the truth began to emerge from the shadows. First came the security, camera footage from around the intersection where the accident had occurred. Then the tracking of calls between the supposed driver and numbers linked to shell companies. Finally, one almost imperceptible detail: a large bank transfer made from an account registered under a company connected to Mia Kingsley. When Liam received the full report, his reaction was not explosive rage. It was absolute silence, a silence so dense that even Julian avoided asking anything. Mia had planned the accident, not with her own hands, but with money, influence, and the coldness of someone who no longer saw limits between desire and control. The motive? Obvious. Liam had rejected her. Olivia had changed him. Mia could not accept losing. She had never accepted it. Liam didn't want revenge. He wanted justice. And this time, he would do it the right way. With the evidence in hand, he called his lawyers and took everything directly to the police. He avoided leaks. He avoided the press. And when the arrest warrant was issued, Mia was found at a resort in the Bahamas, surrounded by luxury, as if nothing had happened. She was handcuffed in front of everyone. The next day, the newspapers flashed the headline, "Mia Kingsley, arrested for attempted murder of Olivia Hayes." The public reaction was overwhelming. The opinion was divided for years between loving and hating Mia, but now it turned with repulsion, and with compassion for Olivia, who until then had been seen by many only as a controversial figure. Olivia learned about the arrest from the hospital TV. Liam had already decided to tell her personally, but he didn't have the chance. And when he entered the room, she was still gripping the remote tightly. "It was her, wasn't it?" Olivia asked, her voice low. Liam nodded. "I didn't want you to know like this." "I already suspected," she replied, looking at her own hands. "Mia always hated not having control, and she hated me because you weren't hers anymore." Liam approached the bed and sat beside her. "This isn't your fault, none of this. You're a victim of something you never caused." "But I blamed myself," she said, her eyes welling up. "I blamed myself for not trusting you, for believing in the photos, for not reaching out when I saw that. I shut myself off. Again. And even so, you saved me." They looked at each other. There was pain there, yes, but there was also forgiveness, silent forgiveness that didn't need to be spoken aloud, the kind of forgiveness that arises when two people choose to stay together despite the wounds. The following week, Olivia was partially discharged. She still needed care, but she could return home with assistance. Blake Manor felt different now, more welcoming. The open windows let the scent of the garden in. The library was full of flowers sent by strangers moved by the story. Support letters arrived every day. One day, sitting in the garden with a blanket over her legs, Olivia found Liam watering the flowers. "You're really growing an entire patch of lavender?" she asked. "Lavender and sunflowers." He said, "You once told me they reminded you of your mother." She smiled. "I said that in the first month. I thought you weren't paying attention." "I was. I just pretended not to." Their laughter filled the air. That afternoon, Liam took her for a walk to the field behind the manor. Still with slow steps, Olivia leaned on his arm, and there, in that patch of land with a view of the river, he stopped. "There's something I need to show you." She looked at him, curious. Liam took an envelope from his pocket. Inside, the legal documents for a foundation he had created, the Hayes Foundation for Women in Recovery. "With your help, I want to create spaces for women who have gone through trauma like yours. I want to turn pain into something greater. And I want to do this with you, not for you." Olivia read the paper in silence. When she finished, her eyes were full. "Why are you doing this?" "Because I can't pretend that loving you is a problem anymore. You taught me that loving is also about putting yourself at the service of someone else's life. I want to learn to do that with you." She held his hand firmly. "Then let's go. One step at a time." That night, lying in the bed they now shared naturally, Olivia looked at the ceiling and whispered, "Thank you for not giving up on me." Liam whispered back, his eyes already closing, "It was you who didn't give up first." And they fell asleep like that, side by side, breathing deeply, finally at peace. But the journey was not over, because true love is not built on victories, but on what comes after the storm. The days after Mia's arrest marked the beginning of a new phase for Olivia. She was no longer just the woman who survived an assassination attempt. She was also the woman who chose to live with courage, with surrender, and above all, with truth. But even with the threat over, the road back to emotional stability was slow, filled with necessary silences, memories that returned in waves, and feelings that still needed to be named. Liam remained by her side every day. Not with grand gestures or theatrical declarations, but with consistency. He was there when she woke up, there when she walked slowly through the garden, there when nightmares made her wake up scared. And more than anything, he was there in silence, respecting her time, her pain, her rebuilding. The first time Olivia managed to sleep through the night without interruptions, she woke up to find Liam sitting by her side, with a notebook on his lap. "You didn't go to bed?" she asked, still with a hoarse voice from sleep. He lifted his eyes with a tired smile. "I was writing some things." "Work stuff?" "No." He extended the notebook to her. "Things about you. About us." Olivia took the notebook carefully and began to flip through it. They weren't poems, not love letters. They were scattered thoughts, confessions written with a vulnerability she had never seen in him. Sentences like, "I never understood silence until I saw you sleeping in peace. There are days when I look at you and wonder how I survived so long. Without knowing this was love, I thought control was safety, but I discovered that loving is allowing yourself to lose your footing, and still wanting to keep going." She closed the notebook, holding back tears. "This is everything I wanted to hear, but you never said it out loud." "Because I was still learning how to feel," he replied. "But I wrote it to make sure. You knew even if it took me time to speak." In that moment, Olivia understood that sometimes love doesn't need to be shouted. Sometimes it whispers. And in the most discreet whispers lies the deepest truth. In the following days, they both began to rebuild not just their relationship, but also their mutual trust. Liam decided to open his schedule and his life to her completely. He started, including her in company decisions, social projects, public events. "I want the world to see who you really are," Amy said. "Not the image they sold, not the scandals, but the woman who stood up when no one else believed she could." Olivia, in turn, immersed herself in the cause of women who survived violence. She started visiting shelters, giving lectures, telling her story with the courage of someone who was no longer afraid of being judged. "If my pain can help others feel less alone," she would say, "then let it be a bridge, not a scar." And Liam accompanied her, always discreet, always firm. Behind the scenes, he was the one handling the logistics, funding the projects, measuring each step to ensure she felt safe. But he never took her shine. He never tried to control. He simply supported. It was in this rhythm of reconstruction that they arrived at the day Olivia returned to the hospital where she had been in a coma. She walked through the hallways with slow steps, accompanied by Liam and 2 women from the foundation now bearing her name. As they passed the intensive care unit, she saw a young mother holding her small child, crying silently. Olivia stopped. She approached slowly without saying a word. She touched the woman's shoulder, and the woman looked at her with red eyes. "I know it feels like it won't pass," Olivia said gently, "but it will. And when it does, you'll find that there's still love even after the chaos." The woman hugged her tightly, and Liam, from a distance, watched that gesture with a lump in his throat. He knew. She had come back. She was no longer the rebel who ran from everything. She was now the woman who embraced with purpose, who spoke with truth, who loved with her feet firmly on the ground. That night, at dinner, Olivia was lighter. She wore a light blue dress and her hair was loose. She smiled naturally, laughed loudly. "What's going on?" she asked, noticing Liam's constant gaze. "You," he replied. You look so beautiful. So whole, she laughed shyly. I'm still under construction. That's how I love you, and there, without speeches, he held her hand across the table. A simple gesture, but filled with everything. Later in the garden, Liam took her to the place where he used to spend hours when she was in a coma, a stone bench between two trees. It was here I understood what love was, he said. It was here I asked God to let you stay. And promised that if that happened, I would choose you every day. She sat next to him, still sensitive, but with her heart firm. Then choose. Again. Now. He looked at her with intensity. He touched her face. And, for the first time, without doubts, without reservations, he said, I love you, Olivia, not because you've changed, but because you taught me to change too. She smiled, a smile full of peace. I love you too, Liam, even before I knew what that meant. And they sat there, in silence, looking at the sky, because in that moment everything that needed to be said was already being felt. Time passed like a breath after the emotional awakening between Liam and Olivia, but it wasn't rushed time. It was time for maturation, roots growing in the invisible, a story now being written with both of their hands. They were no longer prisoners of contracts, expectations, or fears, and although no one had said it out loud, something between them was asking for a fresh start, something real, no clauses, no bets. It was Olivia who took the first step toward this new cycle. She organized a charity event in the name of the Hayes Foundation, bringing together women from different parts of the city, business people, artists, and community leaders. It was the first time she publicly placed herself at the center of something, not for scandal, but for transformation. And the night was a success, elegant, emotional, alive. At the end of the event, while the guests were saying their goodbyes and the last flashes captured genuine smiles, Olivia walked alone to the hotel's terrace. She needed air. She needed silence. She needed a moment to digest it all, and that was where Liam found her. He had been watching from afar, proud, not of the image she projected, but of the woman she had become, or rather, of the woman she had always been, and now could. Be in peace and impressive, he said, approaching with a calm smile. You have no idea what you've just done. I was just me, for the first time in a long time, she replied, and that you is exactly what the world needed to meet. Olivia turned to him, leaning against the terrace railing. The night wind tousled her hair and her eyes were soft. Different. Liam, do you think people can truly rebuild themselves, or do they just learn to live with the broken pieces? He didn't hesitate. I think rebuilding is the very act of loving. It's looking at the other with all the cracks and saying, I'll stay this way. She smiled. Is that what you see in me? No, he replied, stepping forward. It's what I see with you. Because since I met you, I've been learning to rebuild myself too, and that's why... He stopped, took a deep breath, and took a small blue velvet box from his pocket. I asked you to marry me out of pride, Olivia. As a bet. As a means of control, and even so, you stayed. You showed me that love isn't a battle, it's a choice, it's surrender, it's care. She looked at him, surprised. Her eyes filled quickly. Liam opened the box. Inside, a simple ring, nothing extravagant, but with a delicate and unique shine. Now I'm asking you to marry me for love. No contracts, no deadlines, no fear. He knelt right there under the New York sky. Will you be my wife for real? Olivia put her hand to her mouth, emotional. It wasn't just the gesture. It was the journey to get here, the story behind that moment. Everything they had overcome, and still here they were in front of each other, whole ready. She knelt as well, laughing and crying at the same time. I want to, Liam. I want to be your wife for real. Not out of obligation, but because my heart chooses you, today, tomorrow, always. He placed the ring on her finger, and they embraced right there, kneeling, laughing like teenagers. In the distance, the city lights sparkled like silent witnesses to a new story that was only just beginning. Days later, the real ceremony was held in the garden of Blake Manor. No luxury halls or endless guest lists, just true friends, A few, foundation partners, house staff, now treated as family, and the blessed silence of nature around them. Olivia wore a light dress, made of flowing fabric, with her hair styled simply and elegantly. She walked to Liam with her eyes fixed on his as if every step were a confirmation. Liam in turn was more serene than ever. Not because he didn't feel this, but because he finally understood. The love they had didn't need to be displayed. It just needed to be lived. "I promise to choose you even on the days when life gets heavy," he said during their vows. "I promise to respect you as a woman, honor you as a partner, and never forget that it was you who taught me to love again." Olivia took a deep breath and replied, "I promise never to use your flaws as weapons. I promise to see you as a man, not as a hero, and I'll love you not because you saved me, but because by my side you allowed yourself to be saved too." The kiss came next, gentle, respectful, true, and the applause that followed wasn't loud. It was filled with emotion, meaning, and hope. At the end of the night, with no more protocols, Olivia and Liam danced alone in the garden, under a sky sprinkled with stars. There was no more hurry, no more fear, no more walls. There was only the two of them at peace, and in that dancing silence, without saying anything, they knew that was the beginning of a new story, not perfect, but real, because the true happy ending isn't the one where everything goes right. It's the one where even after everything goes wrong, two people choose to continue, together. Blake Manor, which once seemed like nothing more than a mansion made of stone and silence, now breathed life. It wasn't just because of Olivia's presence. It was the open windows, the laughter echoing through the halls, the flowers carefully planted in every corner. It was as if the house had finally found its true inhabitants. In the central garden, under the pergola Liam had restored especially for this moment, Olivia watered her lavender with a small hand-painted ceramic watering can, the same hand that months ago could barely hold a spoon. Now, firm, it guided the water to the roots as if she were cultivating more than plants. She was cultivating herself. She wore a simple dress, barefoot, with her face illuminated by the morning sun. In the distance, Liam watched her from the balcony, a cup of coffee in his hands, and a peaceful expression he had rarely experienced before. There, amidst such simplicity, there was more love than in any gala dinner, any million-dollar penthouse, any contract he had ever signed. Life now had a different rhythm. Liam continued leading his company, but with new priorities. He reduced the number of meetings, delegated more responsibilities, and made space for the social projects he built with Olivia. The Hayes Foundation grew every month, impacting the lives of hundreds of women. And he was there, not on the stage but behind the scenes, sustaining it with humility. Olivia, in turn, became a respected name in circles that once looked down on her, not for fame, but for the truth she carried. She spoke with journalists, students, women starting over, never with superiority, always with vulnerability. Her voice carried the strength of someone who had silently suffered and chose to break the silence, not with anger, but with purpose. And between one lecture and another, between a campaign and a night on the couch with a blanket and an old movie, the two of them built something no bet could ever predict. One night, sitting on the garden bench where it all began, Olivia rested, her head on Liam's shoulder, and asked, "Do you still think about the bet?" He smiled, looking up at the sky. "I do, but not as regret. I think of it as a starting point. It was a wrong choice that led me to the most right place I've ever been." She laughed lightly. "How poetic for someone so rational. It's you. You unbalance me, remember?" "That's good," she replied, squeezing his fingers. "I'm glad we chose each other, even when it seemed insane." The silence came next, but it was a comfortable silence between two hearts that no longer needed to defend themselves. Sometimes they walked around the city like any other couple. They had ice cream on the sidewalk, watched plays at the little theater on the corner, visited the places where it all began. Once they disguised themselves and entered the Astoria Grand Hotel, laughing like teenagers. They sat at the same table, where everything had started. "Do you think that Liam and Olivia back then would have imagined where we are now?" she asked. No, I think they'd be scared, and maybe they'd run away. But thank God they stayed, she added, because in the end, that's what saved us. Staying. He held her hand. He didn't say anything. He just stayed. And in that repeated gesture throughout their journey was the essence of everything. Love that doesn't demand, love that stays. They didn't have a perfect life. They still argued over small things, still dealt with past traumas that sometimes resurfaced, still faced personal and external challenges. But now they knew they had each other. They knew that they didn't have to win every war. They just had to stop fighting each other, and that was freedom. In the last chapter of the book Liam had secretly written, a journal that had turned into a collection of reflections on love and new beginnings, he wrote, "In the end, love isn't about happy endings, castles, or eternal promises. Love is about who holds your hand when the world falls apart. It's about who stays when it would be easier to run. And it's about who looks at you with truth, even when you're far from perfect." With Olivia, I learned that real love doesn't begin with certainty. It begins with courage. He left that page on her pillow one ordinary morning. And when she read it in silence with a full heart, she realized that she no longer needed grand declarations. She no longer sought proof, because their love was no longer a game. It was a place to stay. In the end, it wasn't money nor the contract. It was the courage to look at the other without armor. It was the shared silence when words were missing. And it was love. The kind that doesn't demand promises, but presence. Liam and Olivia proved that true love doesn't come from control but from choice. The choice to stay, to try again, to love even with fear. And you? Have you chosen to love someone? Even after everything? If this story touched your heart, subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, and comment below. Where are you listening to this story from? Your like helps the channel grow and continue bringing more emotional stories like this. Share it with someone special.